Part 3 and final of session 88. Here we're going to dedicate it exclusively to learning how to study the tarot. Let's begin. In the last episode, we covered most of the questions that we had left on this session, and I left the last two questions to this episode so we can cover them with time and more expansion on the answers, because the answers are quite long actually. So we, in essence, in the previous session or previous episode, we talked about the use of the tarot in terms of third density for Ra and other questions regarding that. So we now get into the questions that are actually more extensive in terms of the tarot. The first one is going to be about divination and how's that used. And the second one is going to be about learning how to study the tarot. So it's all about the tarot today. And since we only have two questions, but they're pretty long, let's start right away. The only caveat that I would give to my interpretation is that I don't know much, if anything, about the minor arcana and divination itself, but I don't think I can give much of an in-depth insight into this. But let's see what Ross says about this. In the first question that we have today, Don says, this is question 23. You mentioned earlier that the tarot was a method of divination. Would you explain that? And Ra says, we must first divorce the tarot as a method of divination from this major arcana as representative of 22 archetypes of the archetypical mind. The value of that which you call astrology is significant when used by those initiated entities which understand, if you will pardon the misnomer, the sometimes intricate considerations of the law of Confucian. As each planetary influence enters the energy web of your sphere, those upon the sphere are moved much as the moon, which moves about your sphere, moves the waters upon your deeps. So we're laying the foundation first as to why there is a pathway to know, let's say, the makeup of somebody, and also why that determines certain possible behaviors in the future, or inclinations or possibilities, just basically that. So it's an interesting study, of course, and like they said, I think an astrologer can probably do much better explaining all these intricate details of how you are impressed by the different planets and constellations and so forth. But what Ra is saying here first is that we must divorce the tarot as a method of divination from this major arcana, basically the 22 archetypes that they give. And I love because this answer gives first the warning of saying, don't mix the major arcana in this, let's divorce it from it, and then we can talk about the tarot as a method of divination, right? Then they talk about the value of astrology, which again, I think people who have studied astrology have a very strong, let's say, standpoint in which they can explain why all of this happens, and they can explain why the planet may cause an influence in you when it's in a certain position and so on. I don't have that knowledge, so I can't help you there. One thing that they mention is that they, when used by those initiated entities which understand the sometimes intricate considerations of the law of Confucian, so it seems to be valuable for for astrologers to know the law of Confucian, that I can explain. The law of Confucian is the law of free will, which means that we cannot abridge free will of somebody else by it's very subtle ways in which we can do it, which can be influencing their decision taking or decision making, because we are supposed to make our own decisions. And so if we influence what people are going to decide, then we kind of generate some karma for ourselves, and that is abridging some sort of law of Confucian. I can imagine a couple of things in which divination, or the use of this powerful knowledge of people and their behaviors, can get you into generated karma. So it's something to keep in mind. Now, the last part, Ross says, as each planetary influence enters the energy web of your sphere. So they're talking about the influence of, say, a planet, or they're saying planetary influence, but also I would say the constellations and everything. We know that every single stellar body that we see out there will have an influence, of course, on us. There is even scientifically, we know that they produce some is it gamma rays? I don't think it's gamma rays. I forget the term, but it's a real electromagnetic influence in us. In fact, I remember reading a story, Isaac Asimov, and big on science fiction, and one of the things was concentrating the cosmic rays. That's what it's called, the cosmic rays, which is just light. Cosmic rays do cause an influence on evolution because they have radiation, and so although it's minor, they do cause some sort of influence, right? And this is pure science that tells us this. So it makes sense that, of course, every single constellation has a sort of strength, not because of the constellation. I know scientists would say, oh, but constellations, all the stars are far apart and so on. It doesn't matter how far apart they are. It's just the concentration of them as a focus point in the planet. So that's what's happening. So the planet is being influenced by this. You can see this because Ra doesn't say that it impacts the entity directly. Like you, depending on the position, if you were in a hospital or in an open area. No, it has to do with the planetary energy web, right? That's what they say. As each planetary influence, and I would include here the constellations, influence enters the energy web of your sphere, as each planetary influence and constellations, I would say, enters the energy web of your sphere, those upon the sphere are moved much as the moon, right? Just like the moon moves our oceans and increases or decreases the tides and so on. And this gives a little bit of an extra thing to think, which is that what are we if not water, right? We know this also, we're 60-70% water. So the impression of all of these planetary and constellation influence, of course, must make an impact on ourselves. And this is not only at birth, it's just happening all the time. So you would hear astrologers talk about specific times in which constellations are causing this with the planets and so on. It's a whole science, and I don't even graze the surface of it, but yeah, that's how it works. And it's like I said, it's a very fascinating study. So what do we have so far? First of all, the tarot for divination has nothing to do with the archetypical mind, or not nothing to do, but it's not, the major arcana is not involved in this as a method of divination. Okay. Then those who are practicing this could benefit from learning or knowing the considerations of the law of Confucian or free will. I have a theory, it's not too solid, but I have a theory that Ra uses sometimes law of confusion and law of free will differently, and mostly they use law of confusion when it belongs more to human decisions and because the law of free will is just simply free will in the whole universe, all densities. But the law of confusion is particularly for third density, so it has to do more with humans and our lives and the direction in which we're bringing our own energy, our own mind, inclination, biases, and so on. So all of this is within the law of confusion, which is the extension of the law of free will into third density post-veil. If you follow all of this, I won't explain it because you should. This is so far what we have been talking about: pre-veil, post-veil, free will extended, and so on. Okay, so the last thing they say is that they explain this influence from what we call the external universe, the cosmic influences into the Earth or the planetary energy web, and then how that moves all of us, right? Those upon our sphere are moved much as the moon moves the waters. Let's see what else they say. They continue and say, your own nature is water. Well, I just said that. Pretty good. Your own nature is water in that you as mind, body, spirit complexes are easily impressed and moved. Indeed, this is the very fiber and nature of your journey and vigil in this density. To not only be moved, but to instruct yourself as to the preferred manner of your movement in mind, body, and spirit. So here is a very interesting part about astrology and influence and everything else. So let's take the unconscious being who is interested in spirituality. One of the first things they find is astrology. Wow, fascinating. I can predict my future and know myself and all of these things. It's an interesting door to step into spirituality. And the naive would think, which is usually the thought, well, if everything is already predetermined by my sign and blah, 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 all of this, then I have no control over my life. Well, it is true that there is a half-truth that you have been created by by nature, right? This is nature. Let's not forget that cosmic rays are nature, just as much as Earth, and I'm talking about actual Earth, not the planet, but Earth and plants and everything else that is here. You're made out of all of this, cosmic rays included. So it is true, you are a product of the current state of the universe at the moment of birth, which is always changing, and that's why everybody, doesn't matter what sign you were born or whatever, it's always changing. Plus there are many other things influencing you, which is your genetics and so on. It's a very intricate picture, but the point is that yes, you are a product of that. Thus you may be predicted to move in certain ways and to be moved in certain ways too. We can't deny that. So for example, if I am born a male, I'm going to give a very, very crude example here. If I'm born a male, well, chances are I'm going to be moved towards women. Doesn't happen all the time, obviously, but I would be expected to be that, but there are other influences that come into play, and so that might change it. If I am born in a country that speaks a specific language, then I'm probably going to be moved towards that language. These are very crude examples, but just to illustrate that you are a product of the environment. And that environment includes the whole universe at the moment of birth. And of course, you will be moved. This is what we call epigenetics, which is the reaction to our environment. And of course, there are some genes that are prone to reacting in a certain way, so you may be inclined to one thing or the other. So that is also part of, I am impacted by the influence of the environment and the universe and my sign and all of these things, right? So again, the naive and even the one who studies to a certain degree astrology may get caught in the idea that everything is predetermined. All we need to do is find out, what to do and how to behave and react to the universe. And so there is still a tad of survivability here, or perhaps a lot. And say, I am moved by all of these things. But then there is the last part that needs to be taken into consideration for anybody studying these depths of metaphysics, is that you are supposed to direct your movement. So screw epigenetics, screw everything else about your past, screw everything in your family tree. Destroy everything. See? And from there, if you burn everything down to the ground, then you can rebuild, right? That's what Ra, to me, is saying here. The very fiber and nature of your journey in this density, they're saying, this is the very fiber and nature of your journey in visual in this density, to be moved by everything, every influence. But also to instruct yourself as to the preferred manner of your movement in mind, body, and spirit. So in essence, you have the steering wheel. I mean, you can leave it and then nature will determine where the car goes. That's fine. Nature is going to still move your car, but you have the steering wheel. So where are you going to direct it? Well, it depends on you. You have to become aware of that which is in you that is not moved by any of these influences. And that is the core nature of who you are. If you know that you are the creator, then you can create. If you don't know that you are the creator, then someone else will create for you. Simple as that. And the universe will make sure that happens. So, very important two things here to take out of this paragraph. The first one is that we are water. We're moved. We're impressed by everything. See, I forget his name. Masuro Emoto, I think it is. The famous Japanese researcher who realized that water, when it's impressed with just your own thoughts, when they're crystallized, it forms specific patterns. So from hate to love, you can see patterns that are not very harmonious in hate. Sorry, I love metal, I love rock, but that's also there. But it's the truth. The thing is that music will impress something in you, and that's why you feel emotions. So metal usually is about venting anger. So of course, the water is going to be impressed with that. But if you play something classical and beautiful and harmonious, then the water is going to be impressed by that. This is actual research that has been done and continues to be done. You just impress the water with this, freeze it, look at the patterns, and see it. So our emotions are constantly shaping ourselves. In any case, not to digress, the point is that we are water. We're impressed by everything, obviously including our environment, which extends to the stars. The second thing is that we are supposed to take the steering wheel and drive the car. That's the key. What else did they say? They say, therefore, as each entity enters the planetary energy web, each entity experiences two major planetary influxes. That of the conception, which has to do with the physical, yellow ray manifestation of the incarnation, and that of the moment you call birth, when the breath is first drawn into the body complex of chemical yellow ray. So, two important things here of influence. One, conception. That is when, I would say, we say that conception happens roughly 24, 48 hours after intercourse. And there is the idea that after that, it takes about 49 days, I think I'm right with that number, for, I think one of the first things that form is the pineal gland, right? At that stage. And there's also, I think, the defining of the baby's gender. I'm not sure of that. But in any case, there's something there. It might be it doesn't matter what it is, it's already timed. Once there is conception and the egg is fertilized, then it's only a matter of time for development. So the time of conception and the time of birth, these two, again, they're pretty much timed, but maybe, well, yeah, that's why in astrology we kind of know the time of birth, which has to be, it must be rough, doesn't have to be that precise. The time of birth, day of course, and everything else, date and location also, all of these things, don't ask me how they do it, they have their own magic. But yeah, conception is important, and the time of birth, that's where we get our impression for birth and our whole I always get it wrong, astral chart, that's what we call it in Spanish. The whole chart, that it's birth chart, something like that. So yeah, you get your whole explanation as to your patterns and everything else. I think this is also called the Enneagram. I might be wrong there, but it's a fascinating study, like I said, and it studies the makeup of it. Let me put it this way: it studies the inertia of the individual, and so it can predict patterns. Ross going to talk about this. They say, thus, those who know the stars and their configurations and influences are able to see a rather broadly drawn map of the country through which an entity has traveled, is traveling, or may be expected to travel, be it upon the physical, the mental, or the spiritual level. Such an entity will have developed abilities of the initiate, which are normally known among your peoples as psychic or paranormal. So here are the astrologers, those who study these influences and also have these so-called psychic or paranormal, what do they call them? Abilities, yeah. Which, again, they are meant to sort of read beyond what is the physical knowledge or the study of the intellectual part. So there needs to be some sort of connection there with the metaphysical, in which we call paranormal or psychic. It's a very common thing, and it's interesting that in the West we didn't develop this. We kind of just left it as witchcraft and woo-woo stuff, but it is true. I mean, it's there. So we just haven't explored and researched it. So yeah, this is the astrologer, in essence, who knows the stars, the configurations and influences, and can see a broad map. You see, they can see basically where this inertia came from, where is that, and where it's expected to go. You can see inertia. But the thing is that we're not just like materialists would say, we're just not billiard balls being bounced around by random influences, and we're just a product of mutation and so on. We have something which is called free will, and that is the first distortion of the creation, which means that we have this as an innate, what should I call it, steering wheel again? Yes, that's where we direct our energy. It doesn't matter what inertia we have, we can direct it. And so I love the story of Angulimala, which was a criminal, one of those despised and hated criminals in India at around the time of Gautama Siddhartha, the Buddha. And he was, in essence, converted to, he was enlightened by the Buddha. So, talk about having an inertia. This guy was collecting finger bones to add to his collection. It's a fascinating story too. Angulimala. Go check it out. So yeah, we can change. We can direct our own travel. That's what we are. We are independent agents of the Creator, manifested beings. But all right, what else do they say? When the archetypes are shuffled into the mix of astrologically oriented cards, which form the so-called court arcana and minor arcana, these archetypes become magnetized to the psychic impressions of the one working with the cards, and thusly become instruments of a linkage between the practitioner of the astrological determinations and divinations and the one requesting information. Take this with a grain of salt. I don't understand much of how this works, but I have heard that if you buy one of those tarot deck cards, which so many, with all the different variations, you have to make it your own. Like, you have to study it and see what they represent, each card. If you have been studying astrology, then you can see some patterns and you can kind of create your own interpretation of them, right? I think that's what Ra means by when the archetypes are shuffled into the mix of astrologically oriented cards, which form the so-called arcana and minor arcana. I think this is what makes up these tarot decks. Then these archetypes, the court and minor arcana, become magnetized to the psychic impressions of the one working with the cards. So you kind of magnetize yourself, your mind, what you see. Again, I'm assuming that you make your own cards, right? Or you make your cards your own. And so they become instruments of a linkage between the practitioner, the one who is doing the shuffling of the cards and, drawing them and so on, the practitioner of the astrological determinations and the divinations, and the one requesting information, so the person that they are drawing the cards for. So that's it. That's how it works. You have to make the cards your own, and then you create the interpretations yourself. Depends on you. Lastly, Ra's going to say, oftentimes such archetypical representations will appear in such a manner as to have seemingly interesting results, meaningful in configuration to the questionnaire. In and of themselves, the major arcana have no rightful place in divination, but rather are tools for the further knowledge of the self by the self, for the purpose of entering a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. So I can guess that there's going to be two directions of thought here, and I want to appeal to both. Me belonging to the second one I'm going to discuss. But the first one will rejoice to know that such archetypical representations will appear in such a manner as to have seemingly interesting results, meaningful in configuration to the questionnaire. In essence, this play of trying to use divination for the purpose of somebody who is requesting information of any kind will be there. There will be some meaningful, interesting results, right? This is going to be this is the normal. I want somebody to read the cards for me for whatever it is that I need to do right now, or for the future, or what happened in the past, why am I the way I am, and so on. So people read this to you. There will be some meaningful configuration. I'm reading directly from Ra. There will be some meaningful information for the questionnaire. So, like I said, all of this is like reading yourself. It's almost like, imagine if we can develop a DNA test that will tell you, oh, you're very likely to die of this disease, and wow, okay, I get to know that. Just imagine the implications of that. I won't get into the implications. Something like that is happening here. Not death, but the implications of your inertia. So that's there. Now, for the second person that will be appealed to this paragraph, they say, in and of themselves, the major arcana have no rightful place in divination. So The 22 archetypes have nothing to play in terms of divination, knowing your future, your present moment right now, and so on. But rather, they are tools for the further knowledge of the self by the self. Okay, first up, they are tools for knowledge of you for you, right? Of yourself for yourself by yourself, for the purpose of entering. Here's the punchline. What's the purpose of knowing yourself? Entering a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. Again, I am biased towards this use of the tarot and anything else. Why? Because I live it. Because I am an explorer of this present moment. And the results are just everything I hear from other people looking in the spiritual path. It's like you're sitting here in the present moment and saying, it's right here. Why are you looking for it in any other place? It's right now. No, it's in the form of money and relationships and substances and types of activities that I want to do. And say, yeah, but what's the deal with that? What do you want to get with all of these external things? Well, I want happiness and all of that. Yeah, that's what's here right now. So, again, I am biased towards it because it's here. We don't need to go anywhere else. Why else would Ra say, enter a present moment? Aren't we all in the present moment? That's obvious. Everybody's in the present moment. So why is Ra saying that? I mean, let's reread it. Maybe I'm wrong, Maybe Ra is wrong. And saying, these are tools for the further knowledge of the self by the self. Okay? So the major arcana, or the tarot, the archetypical mind, are tools. Okay? They're not the way. They are tools for furthering the knowledge of self by the self. So they're tools for me to use by myself, for myself. And what's the purpose? They say, purpose of entering a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. Just take away that paragraph. Just look at that. If we're all in the present moment, then why do we need the tarot? Of course we're not in the present moment. We are in our minds. And our minds only know past and future. They know nothing about the present moment. Because the present moment requires no mind, no thoughts, as it were, mental activity, mental formations, and so on. Obviously, there is a mind that is filtering everything as the world. But the mind that is active, the monkey mind, that's the one. We're on the monkey mind. We're not the monkey mind. So this is promoting the knowledge of self by the self to enter a more profoundly, acutely realized present moment. This is what Buddhists have been saying for thousands of years, Hindus as well. Still your mind. Why would you want to do that? Because there's something else that doesn't require your mind to be active and is gorgeous. Satchitananda. So that's why I'm biased. I believe this is the objective. This is the purpose. Because why would you care to predict the future and what the mind is going to do and so on, if you're still going to be impressed by the impacts of the external world? You're still being moved by the world. You're not taking the steering wheel. So, well, it depends. Whatever people want to do. But the cards are there. Let's move to the next question. Question 24 and final of this session. Don says, Ra must have had a, shall we say, lesson plan or course of training for the 22 archetypes to be given either to those of third density of Ra or later on to those in Egypt. Would you describe this scenario for the training course? And so we're going to get now into the training course for how to study the Tarot, the archetypical mind. Ra says, this shall be the last full query of this working. We find it more nearly appropriate to discuss our plans in acquainting initiates upon your own planet with this particular version of the archetypes of the archetypical mind. So, first of all, they're saying, aside from this is the last question, we find it more nearly appropriate to discuss our plans in acquainting initiates upon your own planet with this particular version of the archetypes of the archetypical mind. Not quite sure what they meant there. Wow, the sun came out. Brilliant. Ooh. I feel like my camera's going to explode. Yeah, that's better. Is it? Yep, that's better for now. Okay. I'm not quite sure what Ra meant here. We find it more nearly appropriate to discuss our plans in acquainting initiates. So they find it more appropriate to discuss these plans. I don't know if they're saying it now, like for them, for Don, Carla, and Jim, or if it was in the past with Egypt. But yeah, those who have a more recognition of these archetypes. I also ask myself this question, how do they impress these thoughts? Because that's how the archetypical mind and the Tarot was impressed upon Egyptians. We talked about that a couple of episodes ago, if not in last episode, I think it was. So maybe these priests or whoever was channeling the information already had an affinity for the Tarot or the archetypical mind. They were kind of studying it on their own and they just got the information from Ra. So I don't know. In any case, that's not so important. What's important is what they say next. They say, our first stage was the presentation of the images, one after the other, in the following order. 1, 8, 15, 2, 9, 16, 3, 10, 17, 4, 11, 18, 5, 12, 19, 6, 13, 20, 7, 14, 21, and then 22. Okay, so we need some reference here. These are very simple. I won't describe all of them, of course, but I'll give you the reference. Remember, there are 3 lines: mind, body, and spirit. 1 through 7 is mind, 8 through 15 to 14 is body, and 15 to 21 is spirit. I think I said that right. In fact, you can see, if you're on YouTube, you can watch this. If you see everything in this column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's mind. Then the second one, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's all body, and then the spirit here, right? So 1, 8, and 15 correspond to the matrices of mind, body, and spirit. 2, 9, 16 correspond to potentiator of mind, body, and spirit. Then it goes the same for catalyst, experience. Then 5, 12, 19 are the significators, and so on with great way, transformation and great way. And then 22 is alone, because 22 is independent from mind, body, and spirit. Okay, so what we're seeing here is, first, if you want to study the Tarot, go and check 1, 8, and 15. Okay, why? Because that's the matrix of mind, body, and spirit. You will find relationships there. I'm explaining what Ra is going to say here, so let's read what they say. In this way, the fundamental relationships between mind, body, and spirit could begin to be discovered, for as one sees, for instance, the matrix of the mind in comparison with the matrices of body and spirit, one may draw some certain tentative conclusions. So, again, if you see the relationships between significators of mind, body, and spirit, then you can say, something's happening here. There seems to be a relationship, right? And so, we begin to see that, for example, the potentiator seems to be that in which the matrix is reaching to change, to morph, to change the view of the matrix, the structure of the matrix. So the matrix is always changing due to the potentiator. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, actually, I'm mixing things here. This is a little bit more complex. No, we're just seeing the relationship between matrices here, or potentiators, or across mind, body, spirits. Again, this is very difficult to do in this setting that I have for the podcast. It's better with illustrations and looking at the pairing and all these things, which I'm not doing. But yeah, if you're studying the tarot, if you're not studying the tarot, then this is just going to sound like gibberish to you. But if you're studying the tarot, then you either already know this, or you're learning it, and so you know that, oh, okay, yes, I know what 1, 7, 1, 8, and 15 mean, and so on. But what else do they say? The next part. They say, when at length the student had mastered these visualizations and had considered each of the 7 classifications of archetype, looking at the relationships between mind, body, and spirit, we then suggested consideration of archetypes in pairs: 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, notice that 5 stands alone, 6 and 7. You may continue in this form for the body and spirit archetypes. Yeah, they were talking about mind, right? Mind, body, and spirit. Yeah, I don't know why they said that, it seems. Oh yeah, because they're talking about mind with 1 through 7, of course. So what's the next step? Now that you have considered each archetype as they are, right? Matrices, mind, body, and spirit, potentiator, mind, body, and spirit, and so on. You start to see a relationship between all the matrices, potentiators, and so on. Okay, that's when at length the student had mastered the visualizations and had considered each of the 7 classifications of archetype, looking at the relationships between mind, body, and spirit. Then this is what follows. Once you see the relationships between all of them, then you might want to pair them. But this pairing is within the line. So now, instead of pairing across mind, body, and spirit, the archetypes, you are pairing the lines. So 1 and 2, why? Because this goes deep. This is what I was saying prior. So matrix and potentiator can be seen to have a deep relationship with each other. You see, that's why you see the magician, and I think is the... Oh, I forget the names. I'm really bad with names of these things. The Empress. Plus, people change the names to whatever they want to, which they're supposed to. I mean, you're supposed to change the names to whatever you want it to. Whatever I study of the tarot, I didn't memorize all these names. I kind of know one or the other. For example, Justice and Hermit, that's the matrix and potentiator of body. I said it wrong though. Matrix is Justice, potentiator is Hermit. Yeah, so these are the pairings that you're going to do and find relationships there. One of the first relationships that we find between matrix and potentiator of the mind, for example, is that the potentiator is hidden. That's the unconscious mind. And the conscious mind is the matrix. So it reaches into the unconscious mind for new experience, right? To know more about itself, to bring about something that it doesn't know. It brings about unknowing. And so when it bubbles up, it creates catalyst. This catalyst is the next archetype. And that catalyst, when processed correctly, produces experience that can be now processed by the significator on the positive or negative direction. So that's why you see 3 and 4. You can now study catalyst and experience together. We're talking about mind here, okay? Catalyst, experience, and you can do the same with body and spirit. But mind itself, you're studying catalyst of mind and experience of mind, right? That's going to create a sort of understanding as to how this process of us humans living experience in general, I'm not talking about living the archetype experience. Just general experience, which is prana, its movement, is manifestation of form, is being processed by you, by the mind. And so you can see the relationships. Then 5 stands alone because the significator can be paired. I think one of the other pairing, I don't know if they're going to mention this, but one of the other pairing is the significator on the, say, mind, matrix of mind and potentiator of mind, and then with the other 2s. You can pair it in different ways, but 5 stands alone, significator. And I think it does for body and spirit as well. So, yes, we can draw that conclusion. What else do they say? You will note that the consideration of the significator was left unpaired, for the significator shall be paired with the archetype 22. I'll tell you why. At the end of this line of inquiry, the student was beginning to grasp more and more deeply the qualities and resonances of each archetype. At this point, using various other aids to spiritual evolution, we encourage the initiate to learn to become each archetype and, most importantly, to know as best as possible within your illusion when the adoption of the archetype's persona would be spiritually or metaphysically helpful. So, yeah, the pairing of the significator is with archetype 22. And yet, I would say that you can still pair it with the other, like I said before, the other pairings. So, why is this? Because the significator is the one that is, in essence, is the core. The core of the archetypical mind is the significator. Now, the reason why it's paired with 22 is because 22 represents intelligent infinity in its broader interpretation. Is the creator, is God, that's what archetype 22 is. Now, I mentioned before, and I love it, that is the fool. The persona there is the fool, the one who doesn't know. But again, we have a pejorative, a negative connotation to fool, to the word fool. But as I explained, I think I did in the last episode, maybe I did in the Spanish version of this episode, is that, for example, in Taoism, Zhuangzi talks about the foolish behavior as the maximum behavior, the most virtuous one, because it's not involved with some idealistic view of the world. It simply is as it is. And so that's within all of us. As much as we may pretend to be sophisticated humans, there is a fool in us. And that is the mark of the creator. And so 22 is that which is, it's not changing. That's the difference. You see, it's the significator that is changing. 22 is simply the awareness, the infinite awareness of the creator looking at things. You may have heard that God often is depicted as a child. I mean, not of course in the Western world, but God is depicted as innocent, as knowing nothing. That is archetype 22. So it is helpful to pair the significator with, so you don't forget your source, your nature. Your nature is to be naive, to be spontaneous. That's spontaneity. Spontaneity doesn't come from some sort of contrived mind. It comes from the real you. And so we have that story, which I think I've mentioned before, but it's just perfect for this moment. I think it was a scholar or professor, might have been a military personnel in Japan, who goes to the Zen master, and the master, of course, to tease him, says, who are you? He says, well, I'm so and so, and I have this title and so on. He's like, no. The master says, that's not you. That's your title and so on. And he starts playing this game of identity and keeps asking, who are you really? And he goes into family trees and who he comes dynasty or clan or whatever. And the master says, no, it's not you. That's your clan. That's your dynasty. That's whatever. That's your heritage. Who are you? But no matter what the professor or whoever it was says to the master, then he's not satisfied. And so he just changes topics and goes for a while, and start talking about this and that. And suddenly, in one of those parts of the conversation, there's a joke and the guy laughs. And so the master says, aha, there you are. You see, that's who we are. That's who we truly are at our essence. So we have all these layers of personality and who I am, and the thinking mind gets involved. But that's archetype 22. And so Zen masters are interested in that, not even the significator. That's why 22 is my favorite, of course. Because we need to get in touch with that. We need to be in touch with our spontaneous self. Even the Confederation, I know they sound very sophisticated and language rigid, but they have said in other channelings, don't leave humor out of the equation in any of your steps. Always put humor at some point in your studies. So yeah, so that's how you pair the significator. At the end of this line of inquiry, the student was beginning to grasp more and more deeply the qualities and resonance of each archetype. So now you're beginning to see the dynamics of all of them. Wow, the significator is actually the one that is morphing and changing, and that's the one that the transformation is causing an effect. So the great way may look in a different way, and I see that the matrix of mind, body, and spirit are causing this and blah, blah, blah. So once you see this whole dynamic of who you are and how it's changing, and it's like you see the whole machinery working, at that point, using various other aids to spiritual evolution, we don't know which one they are, we encourage the initiate to learn to become each archetype, and most importantly, to know as best as possible within your illusion when the adoption of the archetype's persona would be spiritual or metaphysically helpful. So adopting each archetype is something that is not very known to me, but is something that we all do anyway. It's just that we do it unconsciously. And so learning how to become these personas when needed, you can become the matrix of the mind for somebody else, for example. I think this is the application of it, right? We can become the archetype for another person. Maybe we can become the potentiator of spirit for that person. We can bring catalyst to body to that person, and so on. That is mastery, of course, of becoming that mirror that people need, and of course for yourself. So you have to first become the mirror of yourself to become a mirror for others, and that's to me how it works. Let's read their final saying on this, and they say, as you can see, much work was done creatively by each initiate. We have no dogma to offer. Each perceives that which is needful and helpful to the self. May we ask if there are any brief queries before we leave this working? So, I love this last paragraph, and I'll make my bridge to the conclusions. I'll piggyback on this that Ra says. Much work was done creatively by each initiate. They didn't say archetype 7 is this. They just suggest what are the implications, or what is it adorned with. You have to make it up on your own because it's an interpretation of how things work. But for example, matrices are fixed. Everything is fixed because it's just the structure of the mind that we're looking at. This requires a long, very long discussion, because we're talking about the structure of the archetypical mind, what the logos design for us, or for itself, not for us, for itself, because we are that. And that is a structure that has these, by the way, archetypes or archetypical minds vary from star to star, or solar system to solar system, star system. But this is the structure that we have, and it's about us to interpret it and to see how it works and how do we play with it. And so they say we have no dogma to offer. Each perceives that which is needful and helpful to the self. And to that I go to conclusions. I admit that that's what I have as well. Over the course of my years in this deep dive into studying Law of One, other materials that have come to me, and particularly myself, and making this decision to transmit what I interpret out of this, I say the same thing. Everything that we hear or read, any external material, must be interpreted by yourself. See, it's all, we have no dogma to offer. We really don't. Nobody does. When we do, when we create a sort of an umbrella that needs to be now protected. And if you go back to, you may say, Buddhism has dogma. Yes, they do, because we're humans. We do that. But the Buddha had no dogma. They just said, I'm only here to discuss the end of suffering. That's not a dogma. That's something that it's an axiom. Everybody wants the end of suffering. Nobody says, hey, I'm here for suffering. You may say, well, masochists do. Get out of here. Masochists derive pleasure out of what seems to be painful for other people. So it's always pleasure. It's actually suffering for them not to feel pain in certain regards. So I think there's the joke of the masochist saying to the sadist, hit me, please. And the sadist says, I won't. You see? If you get that joke, then you get the whole thing about suffering, pain, pleasure within the masochist and the sadist. I won't suffer. So yeah, you know, we're interested only in expressing that which can, see, what do they say? Each perceives that which is needful and helpful to the self. As me expressing, being a public figure to a degree out here in the webs, I have seen people who react negatively against this. You know, they say, oh, Ra's a demon, oh, you're bringing up a cult, or all of these things. Everything that they see is themselves. And that's a funny thing, because on the same side, when people say, wow, great work you're doing, Gabe, and you do this and you explain it so good and so on, all they're seeing is themselves too. It's funny how this reality works. We think there are people out there and that we're, you know, looking at them and either praising them or judging them. All we're doing is praising ourselves and judging ourselves. So whatever you do, you're doing it for you or against you, and that's what is the whole point of this. I could sit here and talk about anything else, and you would just see, you know, your own self there and say, oh, I'm not interested in that. Of course you're not, because you're not interested. It's not you're not interested in me, you're just not interested in whatever it is that I'm saying. So yeah, it's a beautiful way to reflect each other. That's all I got today. That was the end of the session. I don't know what we have on session 89. I haven't been reading them prior to creating the slides and everything else, so we'll see. We'll leave it to the unknown. Thank you, as always, for following up to here, listening, and I hope you're having a great day or good night. With nothing else to say, take care, and I'll see you in session 89.